On behalf of Media Smarts and the Canadian Sociological Association, I'd like to welcome you to the Researching Digital and Media Literacy in Canada Beyond the Academy event. My name is Cara Brisson-Boivin, and I am the Director of Research at Media Smarts. We are Canada's nonprofit Centre for Digital Media Literacy. Thank you for joining us today to partake in this important conversation about building meaningful partnerships between the Academy and the broader non-academic research community. I would like to take the opportunity as well to thank the Canadian Sociological Association and especially the Internet Technology and Digital Sociology Research Cluster for co-sponsoring this event. While we meet on a virtual platform, we should take a moment to recognize the importance of the land on which we are each located. We acknowledge the territory to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in building positive relationships between nations and in developing a deep understanding of Indigenous peoples and their cultures. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all Inuit, First Nations, and Métis peoples. Today, Samantha and I join you from unceded Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory. We invite you to take a moment to reflect on the territory that you are joining us from. And if you'd like, you can share that acknowledgement in the chat. Meeting on a virtual platform provides us with another opportunity, one where we can reflect on the lands occupied by the servers needed to host this technology, and then the lands that have been mined for the minerals and materials needed to build the devices and technological tools that we are all using to join this webinar today. At Media Smarts, we strive to ground our research processes in care and reciprocity. This includes being in a constant state of learning, especially when it comes to understanding the digital well-being and experiences of Indigenous peoples and communities across Canada. We commit to creating and maintaining respectful process and relationships that recognize and strive to address power imbalances across the digital media literacy landscape. We invite you today to communicate with panelists during the webinar. You can scroll your cursor to the bottom of the screen to participate. The toolbar appears, which will allow you to chat. Only panelists will see your comments, and you can also engage in the Q&A. You can also like any questions. You can click the like button, and that will help prioritize a question higher in the queue for our question and answer period. Closed captioning is available, and you can activate that by clicking the Live CC transcript button in the toolbar below. So a little bit about us here at Media Smarts. This is one of our first opportunities and actually our first opportunity to co-host a webinar with the CSA. So I'd like to just give a little bit of an overview about who we are and what we do. As I mentioned, we are a nonprofit charitable organization for digital and media literacy. We've been supporting Canadians with information and tools so they can develop critical thinking and digital literacy skills for over 25 years now. Our vision is that Canadians have the critical skills to engage with media as active and informed digital citizens, and we achieve this through education, public awareness, and research and policy work. At Media Smarts, our educational resources, public awareness campaigns, and policy recommendations are grounded in the best available evidence pertaining to media and digital literacy. In collaboration and consultation with various partners, our research team specializes in designing and facilitating both qualitative and quantitative research projects and conducting robust evaluations of all of our digital and media literacy programs and resources. Our research is also taken up by academics across Canada and internationally to support and inform other media and digital literacy research projects. Our longest running research project, called Young Canadians in a Wireless World, is the largest and most comprehensive study of how children and youth use the internet and digital technology in Canada. Phase 1 of this project began in 2000, and we are continuing our work on phase 4 currently, with reports to be released later in the fall, roughly the fall of this year. In addition to our Young Canadians research, we lead research projects in a wide range of digital media literacy issues, including online privacy and consent, algorithmic literacy, online harms and online hate, the non-consensual sharing of intimate images, digital well-being and collective online resilience, digital equity and the digital divide, and digital media literacy and ethical digital citizenship. Most of our research projects involve working with children and youth from diverse communities across Canada. We focus on designing projects that create safe spaces for young people to share their thoughts, experiences, concerns, and solutions about various digital and media literacy issues. Beyond participation in focus groups, interviews, or surveys, we aim to empower young Canadians through the research process, providing them with knowledge and skills that they can take with them as they continue to navigate the online world and digital technology. Our research informs policy development in both the public and private sectors, and we mobilize the findings and recommendations from our research and evaluation projects in many ways, including through research reports, white papers, blog posts, opinion editorials, public consultations. Sometimes we testify before parliamentary committees, other conference presentations, webinars, media interviews, podcasts, and infographics and social media. Research at Media Smarts would not be possible without community members and organizations who guide and support our work and call on our expertise to return the favor. We sit on many advisory committees for other research projects across Canada, and we're always looking for new opportunities to collaborate with others in the digital and media literacy field. And this brings us in part to our webinar today. So this panel on researching digital and media literacy in Canada features researchers and practitioners from various organizations outside of the Academy. This panel discussion will highlight the research experience and expertise that exists either outside academic spaces or in some cases adjacent to it or in partnership with it. In order to first better understand how research is organized and conducted outside of the university, to highlight recent projects that expand knowledge related to digital and media literacy, to discuss research methods that are best suited to working with diverse communities, including shifts in research and research practice that has occurred over the course of the COVID-19 pandemic, and to build meaningful connections between academic and non-academic researchers for future projects and initiatives in the area of digital and media literacy. So before I hand it over to our panelists, I am going to introduce them to you today. So I'm just going to stop the screen share so that you can see me, and then I'll hand it over to the panelists in just a minute. We are thrilled to have 4 insightful and accomplished panelists join us for our discussion today. We are joined by Rain Lillefelt. She is the Interim Chief Executive Officer of YWCA Canada. Rain is a communications professional and relationship builder with over 19 years in the nonprofit sector. She's an activist, creative organizer, educator, and project manager with extensive experience in governance and resource development. Rain has been the Director of Member Services and Development at YWCA Canada for over 9 years. She's secured funding and managed projects that endeavor to move the needle forward on women's labor market access, digital literacy, ending gender-based violence. And this includes projects like In Good Company, Project Shift, Digital Smarts, and the Violence Against Women Staff Sector Network. She's energized by work that leads to transforming workplaces and being a good ancestor. We're also joined by Professor Rob McMahon, who is working in Media and Technology Studies at the Department of Political Science at the University of Alberta. Prior to joining the University of Alberta in 2015, Rob worked as a postdoctoral researcher with the First Nations Innovation Project at the University of New Brunswick and co-founded the First Mile Connectivity Consortium, a national nonprofit association of Indigenous technology organizations. He is currently the co-director of the Digital Northwest Territories Project, which employs a co-creational approach to strengthen the foundation of community-based digital literacy in the Northwest Territories. We're also joined by Kyle Napier. He is Dene Neheo Métis from Northwest Territory Métis Nation. He's also the co-chair of Native Land Digital and teaches at both the University of Victoria and Mount Royal University. He's a researcher, a language resource developer, a consultant, and a media maker. He's a doctoral student at the University of Alberta studying educational policy studies with a specialization in Indigenous peoples education. He's dedicated himself to supporting reclamation of Indigenous languages of his lineage and remains a passionate learner of the Indigenous languages of his ancestry. And we are also joined by Katie Davey. She's the editor of Public Policy Forum Media and a policy lead. She joined Public Policy Forum in March 2020, and she was recently recognized as a 2021 Young Impact Leader by Future of Good for her role in creating Public Policy Forum's podcast, Policy Speaking. Katie brings an entrepreneurial spirit to public policy challenges of the day. Building on the success of Policy Speaking, Katie now heads Public Policy Forum Media as the inaugural editor while maintaining her role as policy lead. She's the creator of FemWonk, a policy and current affairs podcast with an Atlantic Canadian and intersectional flair. Katie served as Director of Policy and Stakeholder Relations at the Office of the Official Opposition in New Brunswick and Senior Advisor for Policy Stakeholder Engagement in the New Brunswick Premier's Office prior to her work at Public Policy Forum. So our session today is going to begin with some opening remarks from those fantastic panelists that I just introduced to you. We're going to have some reflections from each of them, and then we're going to shift into a question and answer session moderated by my colleague, Samantha McAleese, who's Media Smart's Research and Evaluation Associate. Again, I remind you, we encourage you to submit your questions in the Q&A. You can do that at any time while our presenters are speaking. And at this time, I am going to turn it over to our presenters, beginning with Rain from YWCA Canada.
Good afternoon, everyone. So lovely to be here today. My name is Rain Lillyfelt. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm coming to you from Treaty 13, Takaranto today. I've been with the YWCA for many years, and of course, now that I'm starting to talk, I'm going to cough, so hold on. Tell you. Sorry about that. And now with water. Hold on for one of my fellow panelists. I might need to tap out and ask someone to step in because all of a sudden now I want to cough. Just give me another minute.
Rain, why don't we pass it over to Kyle and Rob? Would that be okay? Or did you want to?
Let me just give me another minute. If I start coughing again, I'll Sure. Thank you. Thanks for your patience. I appreciate it. So yeah, I've been with YWCA for many years. And one of the things that I think is just the greatest thing about an organization that's been around for over 150 years is that the organization has grown and reflected on what the community needs are, what the needs are of women and girls. And so we're an organization with a history of teaching skills at times when community wasn't even ready for women and girls to have those skills. So I always like to talk about the fact that, way back in 1880 something, YWCA Toronto, Montreal, and Hamilton, they were busy teaching phonography, stenography, and typing. And this is at a time when these skills were seen as being too physically demanding and possibly interfering with your reproductive health. So I always like to tie that back into the work that YWCA is doing now in terms of reflecting and responding and continuing to teach skills that are needed for the times. And of course, that means digital literacy. So I'm going to share just a snapshot of some of the work that YWCA has been doing in this area and has been focused on. If I cough again, I will just have to stop. I'm sorry, folks. So one of the early, as part of my work with the YWCA a few years ago, I led a project called Project Shift, funded by Wage. And it was about understanding the impact of tech-facilitated violence on women, young women and girls especially. As part of that project, we conducted research to understand, what young women and girls were experiencing. We led this project off at a time when we were getting more information coming forward from our youth program workers about, what was called then cyberbullying, but we know now it was really tech facilitated violence. And the first part of the project was understanding and connecting with young women and girls across the country. And so from that, we did research, consultations, surveys to understand the issue and how it was playing out. From that came a series of recommendations that we worked forward to develop responses that reflected on that research. And what we learned wasn't, great big new information. It was really just putting the data behind the narratives and the personal experiences, the lived experiences of the youth that we were working with who were experiencing tech facilitated violence. So the resources that we developed were in direct response to some of the recommendations that came forward. Our work with that project uncovered that, what youth were asking for really was an opportunity for them to be understood, for them to be able to report an incident without experiencing judgment, shame, and blame, and that they wanted the adults that they were reporting to really understand as well, to understand their experience and the environment, the digital environment that they were in, and the toxicity. So we developed a series of resources with the support of Media Smarts. For example, we developed a trusted guide for adults. We developed resources for youth so that they can better understand their rights around tech facilitated violence. We developed a resource called Is Our Relationship Healthy? That included, information that spoke about the issue of tech facilitated violence in language that was accessible to our audience. And I want to share that, the research piece of the work was really, I don't think it was groundbreaking, but it was an incredible opportunity to hear directly from youth. And I think that is often where our sector have greater opportunity because we're always working within that level of ethics to connect with our service users. And from Project Shift, we moved on to recognize that the sector itself, the information communication tech sector, really had to also understand and respond to the needs of youth. And so we developed a roundtable of participants who were in the tech sector, folks who were in the tech sector. And that sort of moved forward really quickly, and we developed resources as well. With our project Digital Smarts, YWCA has been training a range of folks who have lower digital literacy. And again, it was directly related to the research that we found through Project Shift, that if we have better, if our service users and community members are better trained around digital literacy, then that reduces somewhat the experience and the exposure to risk in terms of their security and safety online. I'll also share that, we are currently training folks on cybersecurity as part of a rapid reskilling program. Teaching women, non-binary folks, providing them with the opportunity to rapidly train and learn about information in cybersecurity, information about the cyber and security field with a certification training program with the University of Ottawa. And this is a project funded by FedDev. But our other pieces of research really are quite focused on connecting with, trying to understand the issue beyond, as I said, what the lived experience is about. And so most recently, YWCA launched consultations and surveys as part of Block Hate, a program funded by Public Safety, so that we can better understand how hate speech and online hate is playing out across the country. So to that end, we are developing a Canadian lexicon on hate speech terms, for example, and working with a group of women, young women across the country who have been working with us to develop those, develop focus groups with their peers. We have a research team now for the first time at YWCA Canada who are supporting the work that we're doing. So we in the past have really relied heavily on our colleagues in the academic sector to share information, share knowledge. But this is an opportunity for us to connect with the service users that we are constantly working with, and also go further afield to understand how issues play out, and have that work be analyzed in-house by in-house researchers who are developing reports that will then inform, and recommendations that will then inform resources and tools as well. And I think I'm almost over my time, but I can always come back and answer other questions. And thank you for your patience with my coughing.
Great, thanks so much, Rain. We're going to pass the mic over to Kyle and Rob now.
Yes, hi everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Thanks so much for the opportunity to present today. So we'll be sharing a few slides. So I'm just going to pause for a moment and share my screen. And Kyle, could you just give me the thumbs up if it...
Looking good.
Okay. Wonderful. Okay, thanks so much. So again, thank you for the opportunity to present today. My name is Rob McMahon. I'm with the University of Alberta. Here today, Treaty 6 territory. I'm a non-Indigenous settler, really privileged to do this work, and also just presenting on behalf of a team of us working together on this project. Yeah, I'll just let you introduce yourself, Kyle.
Merci, Drizene Hurelias, as you can nip your sulia, Hije Coin, Don Atek, Kulu Tabachon. My name is Kyle Napier. I work with Rob McMahon in Digital NDBT Research Project, and currently calling in from my friend's house in Saskatoon, but I'm from Tapachaw or Fort Smith, Northwest Territories. And just to contextualize a bit about the Northwest Territories is, you know, often when people look to the territory, they understand it within the borders, colonially defined as NWT. But it's really a matter of when you're working with diverse communities is understanding the communities in ways that they'd prefer to be understood. So instead of, you know, like understand the project as digital NDBT, we also realize that we work within the areas of Nunatsiaq and Denende. I'm Dene Nehio Métis from Southern Northwest Territories. You see the overlap there where it says Cree and Chipewyan. So I'm both Chipewyan and Cree, or Dene and Nehio Métis. And you can see that we work with 8 other distinct different language groups. And that's really important in understanding how the different communities relate right across the Northwest Territories. We work distinctly with Gwich'in and Gwich'in Tribal Council. We work distinctly with Clicho language community and Clicho government, and so on and so on. And next to that, you'll see that that we work with, or we featured 17 different digital innovators, and that's just you know, one feature, video feature series among several others. So that's one of our campaigns, hashtag NDBT Digital Innovator, which is featured alongside 2 other of our campaigns, hashtag NDBT Digital Literacy and hashtag NDBT Digital Divide. One hashtag NBT Digital Innovators, features successful examples of leadership in the space of digital innovation. Hashtag NBT Digital Literacy looks to, as Rain had mentioned, examples of digital literacy that are that allow us to be preemptive in understanding the roles of digital technology in the spaces across the NWT. And then hashtag NWT Digital Divide, which we'll go to later, addresses the digital divide distinctly faced across the Northwest Territories. And so, just to contextualize this a bit more is, we're working with a range of connectivities across the Northwest Territories. So there are communities which are more connected and have higher connections to broadband and even to digital literacy. But through Rob's work with First Mile and the First Mile approach, where we prioritize communities which are historically excluded or historically not involved, or literally in understanding connectivity, don't even have data on the map reporting their broadband connectivity speeds because they're not able to take low bandwidth examples of the test. So just to really share that we're working with a variety of communities and experiences.
Great, thanks, Kyle. So just in terms of the project itself, the Digital NWT project, here's a little bit of an overview of that. So it actually started prior to Digital NWT in its early phases with a project back in 2017 with Gwich'in Tribal Council, where we traveled up to Inuvik and offered some kind of pilot introductory digital literacy courses. And then we heard from people there that they would really like us to come back and then teach those in the communities. So we returned the following summer and did a fantastic and amazing, unforgettable trip up the Dempster Highway, myself and my colleague Michael McNally and some students, and taught some workshops within the different Gwich'in communities. And then this program called the Digital Literacy Exchange Program came about, whereby we wanted to scale that up to different communities across the NWT. So we got together with a steering committee that involved different NWT-based organizations and decided to put together an initiative to try and support the foundation of community-based approach to digital literacy. So we use a train-the-trainer approach, whereby we work with adult educators in Aurora College who are located in the different NWT communities. And then we co-create a curriculum about different digital literacy topics with them, and then provide those to people in community through free open access courses. So the topics range from basics, how to use digital devices, how to browse the internet, and then kind of increase up to things like digital storytelling, data collection, and community networks. So with respect to the teaching and learning, so we really tried to focus, as Kyle was talking about, on NWT focused curriculum. So our instructors are either community adult educators or community members working in their communities. And then we held train the trainer events, whereby we worked with them to workshop the curriculum, and ended up doing a lot of that on Zoom because of COVID. And then we had some colleagues up north who helped us review and give feedback on the draft curriculum. So we went through a few iterations of it. We also aim to build a community, so we used social media, of course, but then recognizing, as Kyle said, that there's different levels of connectivity in communities. We also use things like community radio. So our colleagues at Smart Communities Society have a radio show called Digital Trapline, for example, trying to have alternative mechanisms to connect with people. And then finally, and we'll talk more about this on the research piece, is that we wanted people to do self-assessments of their digital literacy levels. So we did some community surveys going door to door to learn that, and worked with local surveyors to support that. This is just some photos way back before COVID, when we could actually meet in person back in 2019, believe it or not, feels like yesterday. This was up in Inuvik, and you can see here, we worked with, these are community adult educators from Aurora College, and just doing some workshopping sessions about how can digital literacy respond to the needs of the North. And then really identifying, like, through different hands-on activities, different aspects of digital literacy. So for example, digital storytelling, we went through the process of filming, editing, and then posting a short digital story on YouTube. These are just a list of some of our courses. So just briefly, we talk about introduction to digital literacy. We go into digital content and connectivity. So issues such as participatory mapping for community network, which is that top photo on the right. People go through a tabletop exercise and then connect up their community that way to try to demystify some of the internet infrastructure. And then also learning a little bit about data management, metadata, that kind of thing. And then the third course is on digital storytelling. So all of these are now available to download for free from our website if you visit digitalnwt.ca, and there's a course page there. Finally, I'll just note that we did do some pre and post test or course measurements, and just finding that people's self-reported confidence levels were increasing. You can see some of the data presented here around confidence in some of the key topics covered in course 1. So we're quite happy about that level of engagement. And then what we're looking to do next is we really heard from people. They were interested in hands-on types of courses. So we're trying to do a little bit of a mini workshop around how to build sort of small scale, local area mesh networks, whereby we kind of distribute those across different different NWT communities. You can see here people kind of map it out in their community, then they build out a unit using 3D printer shelves and assembling the components. And then this is what on the far right, what a completed unit looks like. And these can operate as offline networks that can share things like local videos, or you can do video chats over them and that kind of thing. And they operate independent of the broader internet. So they're community intranets, or we could call them offline networks. So I'll turn it over to Kyle to just talk a bit about some of the other aspects of the project.
Phenomenal. So these are 3 different individuals that joined us for the #NWT Digital Innovators campaign. And really what that is a series of videos, roughly 5 minutes long, in which those who are leaders in the space of digital innovation across the Northwest Territories shared their stories in digital innovation. And so that's just one example of co-production and co-creation within knowledge mobilization areas. Other areas in which we actually brought in, this is Leanne Goose. She's a Juno Award-winning musician. she's Inukindene from Inuvik, and JC Firth-Hagen, who is a leader in the language revitalization space and founder of #SpeakWiccan2Me. And then to the right is Sidoni Okina, who is from Uluhaktuk and is a community researcher with digital NWT. So not only did we feature these individuals as digital innovators, but we brought them on more significantly to the project. I'm another example of someone who was recognized in the space of being a digital innovator in the Northwest Territories, and then was brought into this project, which is really significant given that folks who are doing so in these spaces face many barriers, including reduced connectivity, reduced access to digital technologies and tools, reduced access to training, digital literacy, and the like. And so other examples of these co-productions in knowledge mobilization also include academic authorship and co-authorship. So we are co-authors in academic journals. So Leanne Goose, JC Firth-Hagen, Sidoni, and myself have remained and continue to remain co-authors in academic and academic journals and chapters for books and literature. We also co-wrote news articles together, featured in the Edmonton Journal, specifically to address to Southerners the digital divide across the Northwest Territories in a way that really shines a light on it, because it's really apparent to us and any residents of the Arctic or subarctic that that folks in south of the 60th parallel don't realize just how big of a gap the digital divide actually is. So not only did we co-write a news article, but each of us were individually featured in media and media interviews. And we really tried to mix it up in terms of who is invited to share on behalf of the organization. I recognize my privilege as, as a even a resident of Southern Denende or Southern Northwest Territories, in which there's just more access to connectivity, whereas the experience of someone from Ulahaktak or someone from Inuvik or Tsikachik or other areas would have a different experience with digital connectivity. So yeah, just emphasizing not only were these individuals, including myself, featured as digital innovators, but also as community builders. And I'll move to the next slide here. Oh, did we freeze up here? We might advance the slide if we can.
I think we've lost some connectivity with Rob. Oh, there we are.
There we go. Okay. So, so the NWT Digital Innovators campaign is, as I said, just one of many. So another is hashtag NWT Digital Literacy, which Rob had mentioned. And we'll just go back a slide there if we can. And so, but I really want to talk about the NWT digital divide and the research that went into this campaign. So something I learned very clearly from Rob. I mean, I started as a student of his in the MACT program, and also as a grad researcher. And so he really emphasized crystallization and triangulation when it comes to data verification and methods. So, although the hashtag NWT Digital Innovators campaign brought a lot of people's stories to light into how they're using those digital technologies and the barriers they're facing, we really needed some strong evidence as to the digital divide across the Northwest Territories, right? It's not just a matter of sharing our own personal qualitative experiences, but rather, evidencing it. And so right now, Digital NWT is a leader in the space of having correct data and information regarding digital connectivity across the NWT. So we partnered with CIRA, the Canadian Internet Registration Authority, to share their tool, the Internet Performance Test. And we actually, that's an outdated photo. It says there were 1,600 tests run. It's actually around 2,900, so almost double now. And so we really pushed that to understand, what are communities reporting in terms of megabytes per second? What are they reporting in terms of their data packages and that are available in their community? And are they adequate, especially given the age of COVID, when digital connectivity is integral to global participation, or even just participation to in education experiences. So talking about triangulation and crystallization, so we did the CIRA speed test. We also enacted an SMS text survey campaign, which I'm going to talk about shortly, as well as conducted qualitative interviews with global Indigenous digital innovators, sharing their experiences right across from not just in Canada, but across the continent. And we'll just go to the next slide here. So we'll talk a little bit more specifically about some of these other surveys and our building capacity approach. So just to talk more directly, we held some household surveys, and those were conducted by community researchers, right, who are of and representative of community. And we provided training. We included we mailed them up iPads and other materials that they got to keep as community surveyors, as part of a different NWT Indigenous campaign on a separate project. I'm rehiring some of these researchers because they're trained and they have capacity and they know how to speak to community. So that's just an example of some of the household surveys. Another example is the SMS or text surveys. So you'll notice we have an 867 number up there. Anyone from the Northwest Territories or Nunavut would be familiar with 867. It's a local number. So we want something that's like approachable, that people are familiar with, and allows us to build relationship and community. The SMS survey poster on the previous slide actually had a prize draw of a moose hide satchel or handbag that's designed by Dene clothing designer Darcy Moses, who is a very famous clothing designer. He has clothes on like Saks on Fifth, and he just recently taught a Dene boutique clothing design course at Banff Center. So very well known featured artist. So we've continually involved featured art, Indigenous artists across the Northwest Territories, because those are the folks that we really need to work with in community. And that's yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Kyle. And we'll just end here. Happy to answer any questions anybody may have. And this is just a thank you to our funders, including CIRA and the Government of Canada through the ISED Digital Literacy Exchange Program. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So we're going to take a moment and turn the mic over to Katie at Public Policy Forum.
Yeah, thanks so much, Cara. And I feel so grateful, frankly, to be learning from all the other panelists as well. So I'm going to talk about a few key things. First, I'm going to tell you a little bit about who we are and who the Public Policy Forum is, and how we actually undertake projects and work, because it is, I think, directly related to kind of the second part of what I'll chat about is our strategic pillars and the work that we've been doing over the last, I guess, 5 or 6 years now on digital democracy and good governance. And then again, I'll wrap up at the end just with some impact measures, some challenges, et cetera, that we face. So the Public Policy Forum is a national, nonpartisan, independent think tank. Really what that means is we conduct research, we do convening, and we celebrate public policy leadership from a perspective where we contain and maintain editorial control and decision making. We are a membership-based organization, so we have about 250 members across Canada from every sector, so all members of, or all, not members rather, all levels of and orders of government across Canada, including Indigenous representatives. Every province and territory is a member, all of the major federal departments. We have about 25, I think, might actually be a bit higher than that. I'll have to double check, post-secondary institutions from across the country. And then again, members from the private sector, members from the nonprofit sector, and associations. We are a registered charity. And again, we maintain our independence and keep that at the core of everything we do. So what does that mean practically? It means that for me and for my colleagues who lead our policy projects and work, we need to seek kind of funding for each project individually. So we don't have any sort of kind of endowment or anything like that. We decide that we want to do a project, we write a proposal, and then we go out and seek funding for that. We also won't do a project where there's an individual or one funder. So all of our projects have a combination of typically a government partner or multiple government partners, typically a private sector partner, and then typically kind of a nonprofit partner, whether that's an association or foundation or philanthropic organization. Some of our projects will have up to 10 plus partners, one of which I'll talk about in a minute. But that really kind of allows us to ensure that we have balanced perspectives and aren't kind of allowing our independence to get impacted, particularly because what we do is policy and public policy. That means all of our work really targets government and targets industry and targets folks that are kind of holding on to the levers of power and decision making. We don't actually have internal capacity, I guess is how I'll call it. What that means is actually when we do our research, we seek out other partners and we seek out academics, contractors, authors, speakers, et cetera, and really build that capacity through our networks. And we also kind of pride ourselves and call ourselves an applied policy shop. And what that means to us is that anything we do will have a direct policy impact and will have a direct kind of set of recommendations that we believe are very implementable. I think implementable is a word. Short week, it feels like it's maybe already Friday. So we have 6 strategic pillars as an organization, and one of those pillars is digital democracy and good governance. We believe that these 2 pieces go hand in hand, and there are 2 key pillars that we really think are 2 strands that fall under this category for us. It is the digital, and it is the media and the news. So what that means is really, in our mind, we have 2, if you kind of think actually of a DNA strand, this is how our CEO describes it. There are 2 interrelated kind of helixes under this file. One is having a strong and robust media and news media ecosystem that allows for access to good quality, solid information in communities across Canada. That is being challenged very much in the last number of years, especially, 5 years. And I can talk about that in a second as well. And at the same time, understanding the digital landscape and what the new digital world means from, again, a policy perspective, and particularly our focus on that context is disinformation and online harms broadly. So we've built our entire project work under this strategic pillar of digital democracy and good governance in those 2 frames. So really kind of the online space and the media and good governance space. News. And when I say media here, I'm talking about news media specifically. So I will make that distinction here. So the projects that we've undertaken in the last 5 years, again, as I say, are divided in those 2 categories. The first really flagship project that set us up to continue this work was called The Shattered Mirror. It was released almost 5 years ago to the day, just a few months past now. And that really looked at a deep examination of the news media ecosystem in Canada, what was happening and what could be done about it. That obviously demonstrated a number of key major issues, including, again, as I say, dis and misinformation, including the closing and the consolidation of news media across Canada, especially in local communities, and including, again, a number of policy interventions that were necessary to respond to, again, really the decimation of the funding model for news media. It still continues to be one of our biggest and most successful kind of flagship policy reports. I'll still now, when talking with folks in different journalism programs and things like that, be told that it is still foundational reading for many journalists, students across the country, and really sets that foundation for diagnosing the challenge and the problem. Out of that, though, 3 things happened. One, about 7 of the 11 recommendations that were made in that paper have been implemented in one way or another by particularly the federal government, which this report was directed to, including a massive kind of package to support journalists across Canada and news organizations across Canada to the tune of $675 million. It also resulted in the creation, or was part of the creation, of the Local Journalism Initiative and the McGill Center for Media and Technology. We at PPF also, PPF being Public Policy Forum, apologize, I didn't explain that acronym off the top. And we also from there developed our digital democracy work. So that started with a digital democracy project, and that really was focused specifically on 2 things. One, trying to decipher and decide and define what dis and misinformation looked like in relation to Canadian elections. So we looked at that in the 2019 rather election, and the 2021 election. Yeah, I guess it was just 2021 election as well. We also, as part of that, trained journalists on dis and misinformation and how to kind of react and respond to that in the media landscape. It also resulted in the creation of our Commission on Democratic Expression. So this is a major project at the Public Policy Forum. It's one of our largest pieces of work and undertaking. It's a 3-year project, and we just wrapped up. Well, we didn't just wrap up. The report for year 2 will really be released actually next week. It was supposed to be released this week, but it'll come out next week. But this commission has 2 key parts. One, it has a set of expert commissioners, which include former Chief Justice Beverly McLaughlin. It includes experts from across the space and across the sector, including, again, Beverly McLaughlin, Prof. Taylor Owen, who is the co-chair this year, and a number of other folks. And they are tasked with answering the question of addressing online harms in Canada. Last year, they put forward a report that detailed a 6-point plan to address and regulate online harms in Canada. This year, they've taken it a step further, and their report, which again will be released next week, looks at how to address and how to actually implement a regulatory framework around addressing online harms in Canada, specifically around disinformation. For folks following that work broadly, or the misinformation and online harms space, you'll know that there was also just a federal government, expert panel that was launched just a few weeks back, and our commissioners will be supporting that work as well. The second part of that project, though, is the Citizens Assembly. So each year, the commission also is joined by a representative sample of Canadians who come together and answer the same question that the commission is answering, but again, from a representative sample across Canada. There are about 46 Citizens Assembly participants. That really is a foundational importance of that work, and frankly, a key differentiator in that work, because we're bringing together, again, folks that have not necessarily any background in this area other than potentially being, technology users, and proposing the same question, proposing a full curriculum for them, and allowing the deliberation to happen among participants of the Citizens Assembly to come forward with a report and recommendations. They did that again on this work this year, and their report was released in January of this year. And not entirely surprising at all to us, their recommendations really do mirror the similar recommendations that the commission will make. We've also had a number of smaller projects under this umbrella, specifically actually because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So as the pandemic kicked off, we started to see, as you all did as well, really vaccine skepticism and science disinformation ramp up in a way that had been really just happening in more of the fringe in the past. So we authored a short report on science disinformation specifically, and the pathways that it takes to kind of, from again, a news media system, get into the mainstream. That was released in June of 2020, rather, the year of the pandemic, June 2020. Then we did a piece of follow-up work on that, again, specifically looking at vaccine skepticism and vaccine hesitancy. And we used a data-backed approach to that with public opinion polling. So we worked with Dr. Peter Lowen at the University of Toronto and his lab called Pearl, to do waves of public opinion polling to understand how the general public was reacting to the dis and misinformation that they were seeing from the COVID-19 vaccine specifically, and other measures, including, social distancing and non kind of medical measures to address the pandemic. We also were tracking through that confidence in government and confidence in institutions, and we released a monthly report using that data, kind of tracking throughout, and that project wrapped up about a little over a year ago now. We also, it's funny, kind of taking stock of all of the pieces of work we've done for this presentation was really humbling, because I've been involved in so many of them, frankly, but it's a lot, and it's complicated in some ways because there's so many. So I apologize for listing, again, kind of in order here, but all of the information can be found on our website too. But we undertook a report on digital infrastructure and digital connectivity, because foundationally, again, what the pandemic demonstrated, of course, is it put a stark spotlight on what the digital divide means from an access of service perspective. So we undertook, again, a policy report on what it would mean to both achieve a fairer digital infrastructure connectivity across Canada, and what we call a faster digital connectivity. So it was a fairer and a faster landscape, both from the perspective of, again, closing the digital divide, and also realizing the kind of competitive advantage that Canada could have by implementing a faster digital infrastructure, whether that's 5G or otherwise. And we also started looking at assessing the shattered mirror, which I mentioned was the first piece of work that really kicked this off for us. So we actually just last month released a report called The Shattered Mirror 5 Years On. And that really kind of capstones again this problem set that we've been looking at for now over 5 years. We'll continue to look at these problems from this perspective, and again, continue to recommend key policy recommendations and frameworks that can support addressing the key foundational underpinnings of the challenges here, whether that's again addressing online harms, disinformation, or whether that's creating and building and rebuilding a strong news media ecosystem so that at the foundation of this work, folks have actual access in their communities to the information that they need to make informed decisions, and so that we're removing and addressing the pollution that is happening online at the same time. So those will continue to be key pillars at the Public Policy Forum. We'll continue to do work on those pieces from a policy perspective. As I say, our commission's second year report comes out just next week. And at the same time, we recognize as well that a long kind of PDF document policy report is not the most accessible document for many. So that's where Public Policy Forum Media, PPF Media, comes into play. We're using and building different communications tools there to be able to make policy and make our recommendations a bit more accessible to the general public and to policy interested folks as well. So for us, that has looked like podcast, it's looked like more events and in-person, or not in-person, rather virtual events, but simultaneous events that happen at once, I guess, or live rather is the word I was looking for there. And it's also looked like, again, experimenting with different methods of technology, formats, et cetera, including things like Twitter Spaces and other types of avenues to be able to mobilize and have these conversations in a larger and more accessible way. Again, I highlighted that at the beginning of these remarks that I would highlight some challenges. Frankly, one of the challenges that we do face, or two of the main challenges that we face ongoing are, one, again, kind of partnerships and maintaining expertise with external folks and partners, and two, as I'm sure everyone on this call or all my other panelists would echo, is funding. We are at the whim of if we are able to fund projects. And so, as an organization that exclusively runs on a project-based funding model for our policy projects, those kind of challenges of ensuring funding and creating the right relationships maintain to be our two biggest challenges, because at the end of the day, if we don't secure funding, we don't get to do the work and we don't get to do the projects. So I'll leave it at that, but I look forward again to conversation and question with others as the rest of the event unfolds. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Katie, and thank you to Rain and Rob and Kyle as well for your presentations. It was really great to hear about all of your fascinating and exciting and ongoing projects. I have tons of notes that I've taken and already kind of seeing some, some themes emerging that maybe we can tackle through the Q&A. I don't see any questions in so far, but please, for folks in attendance and folks listening in, please hop in that Q&A if you have anything specific you want to ask of all the panelists or of a specific panelist, then go ahead. I'm Samantha McAleese. I am the Research and Evaluation Associate here at Media Smarts. I'm here on unceded Algonquin territory along with Kara. So yeah, I noticed, as I said, some key themes running through. So, this kind of focused on the, on community-based and the collective nature of all your work in order to tackle a variety of digital and media literacy issues. And I appreciate what feels like, more of a direct a direct and an immediate connection between research and resource development, and the variety of ways in which your research is mobilized and taken up by many audiences, both within and outside of academia, and in other spaces like amongst policymakers and within communities themselves. So yeah, I see everyone turning on their cameras, so that's great because we're getting into the more conversational part of this panel. So if folks want to turn on their cameras. I think I'll start with a general question for everyone, and we'll go in the order that you presented. So I'll start with Rain, and then shift to Rob and Kyle, and then Emma, Katie, and you all kind of started to touch on this, and Katie, especially at the end of your presentation there. But we organized this webinar to highlight research that's happening outside of the academy on digital and media literacy issues, but also to help to continue the work that we're all doing to strengthen the connection between people in academia and people working outside of academia. So if you can think about some of the key factors that are needed to kind of keep building these meaningful and mutually beneficial connections between academic and non-academic researchers and organizations. I guess what are the first things that kind of come to mind? What would help facilitate these connections between either you, your research team, your organization, and folks working in academic spaces, and what might that look like? And Rain, we'll start with you if that's all right.
So I would say one of the key pieces for us has really been has been an understanding of the sector, of the challenges that the not-for-profit folks experience. So whether that is not having an immediate response to requests, or not having capacity, for example, to respond to those requests, I think is really key. One of the great things that we've been able to do with some of the SSHRC partnerships that we've been a part of, is really taking the time to understand the goals for all of the partners involved, which includes for the YWCA, which includes for the not-for-profit sector. We've also been really challenged by projects where we've had great intentions and interest to participate, but we're also fairly small organizations and with a big footprint or imprint for sure. But at the end of the day, we're small organizations, and so having that understanding when you're looking at a major university or academic institution versus a small organization, there's always that get to know you phase that I think is really important, and really understanding the culture of each organization. I think that really fits not only for partnerships that are between the not-for-profit and the academic sector, but even within each spaces, because not all of us are alike. And I think that what really helps with that is time and the patience to sort of really get together and understand what the needs are for each of those organizations.
Yeah, I appreciate the focus on relationship building there and taking time, especially when that can sometimes maybe be missed amongst all the deadlines that folks are trying to meet. So yeah, I think that still taking the time to build those connections is important. Rob and Kyle, I'll move on to you next to answer this question.
Yeah, I think I'll build on that point because I think it is really essential to this kind of work. And I think oftentimes that engagement piece from an academic researcher perspective gets positioned as something that happens before research. Whereas, as Rain was talking about, it's really embedded within all aspects of that and really foundational to the work. So in the context of our Northern project, and this is drawing on a lot of the work of Indigenous scholars and Indigenous scholarship and research methodologies, and really recognizing coming from this topic, coming at it from an academic institution, which is embedded in that settler colonial history and the extractivism, including of data, of research information, and so on. And then drawing on the work being done in Indigenous research methodologies that really centers relationality, reciprocity, and so on. And then thinking about how to do that in different activities. So this is where sort of that idea of well, if we're looking at curriculum, and that's a research question, how can we work with communities to hear from them what type of curriculum they're interested in? And then all of the mistakes we made and the challenges we faced around that, and with COVID, I just wanted to note that too, that along the past journey of this project, we've hit so many ways of having to redirect the project and redirect our engagements, and learned a lot along the way in that perspective. And then COVID really compounding that, because we weren't able to go in person and so on. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of really frame it in that perspective, and that really came about in our attempts, but of course, making a lot of mistakes along the way for sure.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Kyle. No, go ahead, please.
My apologies. Just to follow Rain and Rob and Katie, you're sorry to following your opening remarks there around key factors in building and maintaining those meaningful connections is recognizing the value of expertise and experiences of community members. And it's not just a matter of academic or non-academic, but rather the academics don't have the expertise or experience of those from community on the ground. And so, the fact of the matter is that a project like this cannot get the rigorous data that is needed to make change without effective community partnerships. And so what that requires is upholding and centering those voices of those with experiences that are more reflective of the realities that they're experiencing. And as had been mentioned, not just from the beginning of a project, but throughout, including after, is that relational approach, and ensuring that key priorities are established together, and that shared vision is worked towards together. And then another thing I'd like to add is an acknowledgement, just following Rob's notion of just having to be adaptive and reflexive to change, is a notion that even as an Indigenous academic and researcher, or for everyone really involved in the process, I'm trying to say is that there are key moments of learning for all of us, but ultimately if there's a deep and sincere earnestness with working with community and in honoring local culture and protocol and voices, and if that is established as a key priority for the project, above and alongside that relational approach, that's really how we're able to work with communities to get the data that makes effective change in policy and society. Katie, I'm sorry, I know that you had a solid answer for this too.
No, not at all. I was just also going to build on what folks have said, and I think I can give a couple of concrete examples as well. A lot of different funding and conference presentations and things like that these days, especially in the academic community, ask for folks to engage civil society and to have civil society participation. But what I have often found to be the case, unfortunately, is to others' points, we'll get asked kind of too late in the process. And so what that ends up meaning is, a very concrete example, I was asked to present with a group at the Metropolis conference in Vancouver on immigration that happened last month. And they asked the week that the kind of presentation prospectus was due, and they had no resources to, compensate my travel and conference fee to Vancouver. And as again, a nonprofit, as I mentioned, that funds all of our research, we just don't have, frankly, kind of a conference budget in our back pocket to be able to participate in events like that that aren't directly project related. And even when they are directly project related, we have a hard time doing that. So, that was a very concrete example that unfortunately I had to decline that opportunity because of, again, the kind of funding and timelines of the request. And that does happen from our perspective quite regularly, unfortunately. And we often would love to say yes and would love to be, again, a partner in moving forward those pieces, but it oftentimes is challenging. And I'll say we do the same thing sometimes, right? When we want to ensure really great and diverse representation in our forums, we might be asking for participation too late in the process. And that's something that we need to also recognize and kind of take ownership over. But that's, from the kind of practical perspective, the challenges that we will sometimes face when working specifically with the academic sector.
I appreciate that note about the kind of differences in resources and funding, and I think it's something, we're in the nonprofit sector, we're all trying to raise all the time. Appreciate the notes from Rob and Kyle around, Kara and I, and I'm sure others have been calling it the pandemic pivots that we've all had to make throughout our projects. And, sometimes there's flexibility for that, and sometimes there's not, depending on who's funding you and depending on who you're working with. But I think that most people, have realized the need to be, kind of, more flexible throughout the past couple of years. Rain, I had a specific question for you, if that's okay. You had mentioned in your presentation that what's new at YWCA Canada is an in-house research team, and I wanted to hear a bit more about that and kind of what kind of concrete, more about the concrete changes, what that means for the work that you're doing, and kind of the importance of being able to establish that at your organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been a little bit amazing. It's not often that we can have this opportunity, and it really is project specific. So, like what we usually do is we quilt funding together to create a tapestry of a job description so that we can have a person to support the work. So it just so happened that a number of our projects, have really solid research components tied to them. And so we were able to hire at first a single researcher and then an additional 2 people. So that's been really incredible because we've been able to have the kind of discussions where our researchers are tied into a project from the beginning, from the moment of inception, essentially. And a lot of the research, because they continue to be with us, there isn't this handoff and then move on to the next project. So they're like the nuances, and because they've been participating in things like focus groups and training up some of our service users and program participants and fellows on participatory action research, they've been able to, not only expand on certain projects, but also expand the capacity of our service workers as well. So that's been really excellent. But it's all related to projects that have focused around online hate, so block hate. They're doing work on that project. We also have we're establishing a couple of financial literacy projects as well that are going to be integrated throughout some of our existing programs and services. And so creating that shape is really helpful. But it's been a bit of a game changer for sure. Because not only are like there, I don't know, I would say that we have unicorns at the moment, because they come not only with experience around like lived experience, but the academic experience, languages. I think with our researchers, they have maybe 6 languages between them all. So it's really been incredibly helpful. But the biggest piece really has been, it's not a start and stop and move the work on to someone else. It's like we can have these ongoing conversations by incorporating the researchers into our planning conversations and into the development of resources and training materials.
Yeah, that's really great. And yeah, I'm excited that you have that resource now. That's really great. Before I take up more time with questions, we don't have any coming through the chat, and that's fine, because that means everyone's just listening and soaking up all your brilliance, and that's good. But I wondered if anyone has questions for other panelists, if folks have questions that popped up while you were listening to other people's presentations. So I wanted to leave space for you guys to ask questions as well.
I can kick us off while you think of other questions for each other if you like. And I'm listening to you all speak, and also of course Samantha and I coming from the same kind of nonprofit experience that Katie spoke to and Rain spoke to, and Rob and Kyle. I love, Rain, that metaphor of patchwork and quilting, funding together. Katie, you talked about this, stacking funding from different, private and public and government. And I think that it is, it cannot be overstated how significant of a challenge that is for nonprofits to do the work that we want to be able to do. And again, as Rain was speaking about, and for academics or other partners in other spaces to take the time to understand those hurdles that we're facing in doing the projects that we want to do. So I think that getting to the question, one of the things I was thinking about are some of the challenges that we might face or experience in partnerships. And, if we could, provide in this context, we're talking, somewhat directly to academics, but I think, it's been said, other partners with here are some really specific, here's a couple of things that we would love, to see from a partner or approaching us, maybe we could provide those on the call and those who will hear this eventually with some of those tidbits. I'll give an example, from our perspective. One of the biggest things from us is proper remuneration. We often get approached to do academic partnerships in SSHRC, for example, but we're often asked to give in kind. And as has been mentioned by all of our panelists today, we were coming from small organizations with limited staff time. So that creates barriers to our participation. It challenges our experiences of this being a reciprocal partnership, a meaningful partnership, when not all the time. We've had some great success as well in SSHRC, partnering together with folks who recognize those challenges, have taken the time, as Rain spoke to, and others. But more often than not, the vast majority of funding is somewhat lopsided. So the quickie that I would say is, when approaching someone for a community or partnership grant, we have to take that time that Rain talked about, and we really have to think about what it's going to mean to properly remunerate that partner. And I'll leave it there, but I'll open that to others. If there are some quick tidbits that you can give to partners around, here's a practical thing that you can consider for making those partnerships meaningful.
It's not the nicest thing, but I found that having MOUs or having those agreements being really clear has been incredibly helpful. And being able to revisit them throughout the life of a project. So especially, some of the SSHRC projects are 7 years. And, you can't, we've seen that with COVID, that, we absolutely had to pivot to focus on getting aid to our member associations during that time. So really the ability to respond to research or review a document was like low on the list, right? Like I literally was spending time getting hand sanitizer up to Iqaluit. And so having that MOU is important, I think, and also that flexibility for partners to understand that that's going to be needed.
Yeah, and I think, just building off of that, one of the pieces on our side, again, especially if we have multiple, or not especially if, but because we have multiple funders and partners on every project, we commit to deadlines, right? And we commit to specific types of reporting. And so, when we are working with partners that, as a policy lead and my colleagues, we kind of have a joke that, we've never received a paper on time. And that's, for us too, like it's hard to hit our paper deadlines when we're writing, but that for us, kind of deadlines compound because it means that we have to have multiple partner conversations as well. And so the digital infrastructure project I mentioned, we had 12 partners on that. So when our deadlines, because the panel was taking a lot of time to adequately consider the information in front of them, for me as the kind of the manager, that meant I had to go and have 12 different partner conversations to, amend those MOUs and to amend and to ensure that that side of the project was kept up to date as well. So it's really kind of the double-sided relationships where on the one hand, you're building kind of the content partnerships and relationships, and on the other hand, the funding partnerships and relationships, and ensuring that, we're able to kind of be that middleman in many cases, right? And kind of ensuring both sides understand the commitments and the pressure that we have made as well, I think is a really important piece broadly that sometimes, again, we as perhaps the middleman could be better at communicating on both sides.
Tyler, Rob, did you have anything to add there?
I'll jump in here before Rob is in terms of those quick tips for building relationships, and Rob had mentioned this earlier. Our work is inspired by CBPR and PAR, right? The community-based participatory research or participatory action research. But ultimately, in work with community across the NWT, we had to prioritize IRM or Indigenous research methodologies. And let's look at that point for a second. So in that region, it's much more relevant to do for our work to be informed by IRM. But we can even take that and contextualize it in a way where, if you are working with community members across a variety of communities, maybe it's not the institution's determination as to what would be, or your organization or your institution or your whichever, your company, to determine what is the best way to engage with community. Rather, what IRM positions is that the community would determine what is the best way to engage and work with them. So for instance, we just saw 2 or 3 days ago in the news, there's a community, Lidlekwe First Nation, LKFN, and they created their own intellectual property jurisdiction with regards to research with community, such that that any research done in that area, in that land claims area, would need to be approved by that First Nation, and so that that really follows, our priorities in terms of ensuring that we're working towards the shared visions and goals of that community. So I'll just break that down real quick in some top tips. Is begin your outreach early, at the very beginning of that engagement, instead of presupposing the problems that a community might be facing or even presupposing the solutions. If you work with community from the very beginning, it won't be as much guesswork or filling in. You can actually respond directly to those issues. And then, like everyone else had been saying, it's not a matter of just at the beginning, but all throughout the process, including after, right? This is is a relationship, and it wouldn't be possible without that. Something that's really worked effectively for us at Digital NDBT and in my own personal work is to examine, you're noticing a theme here, intellectual property and copyright. So what's distinct for us, if we do recording or documenting or videography or photography or any type of mediated activity, the individual gathering that media, taking the photo, pressing the record button, that's the person who retains copyright. So something that's really critical for us is actually reattributing copyright back to the folks who are sharing their knowledges with us, whether that's elders, that's knowledge keepers. So we look to those processes again from a community first approach. Like I mentioned, identifying and working towards those shared goals and visions from the beginning, sharing our research materials back with community, not just at the end, not just post-publishing, but throughout, and not just a matter of sharing researchers back with community, but inviting them in the research publishing process, right? Co-authorship, ensuring that we are, I'm speaking as a member of community and as a researcher, which those who are looking to IRM would see as it's called insider-outsider a kind of approach, right? So, so involve people from community, right? Because they have that nuanced understanding of what's appropriate, what's inappropriate, what makes sense, what doesn't, and then ultimately, right, that just honoring this for the relationship that it is. So it's not just a project specific instance of communications, but rather an ongoing understanding of that shared vision.
Maybe I'll just speak to a couple of things as an academic doing research in this. And then when you're thinking about budget line items, when you're applying for a grant, because I was thinking about things like, research equipment. So if you have local researchers who are supporting data collection, like, is there a means there to support, the transfer over of that equipment following the grant? And then maybe there's like a server involved, and the server goes to the community organization. And touching on something Kyle mentioned about copyright, we were experimenting a little bit with licensing. So we wanted to have like curriculum and materials that would reflect Northern perspectives, right? And so we did some outreach to musicians, and we said, hey, if we can use your music in this video, we'll license that off you and then contribute X amount. So I think, budget line items might include supports for musicians or visual artists or that kind of thing. So those are a couple of ideas that come to mind. I absolutely, from the academic research side, empathize with the logistical challenges of connecting with everybody and maintaining those relationships. But I think if it feeds into the core research, it can really strengthen the data collection and analysis from our perspective as well, if you're taking that CBPR approach. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely hard but important work, especially for the type of research that you're all doing. So there is a question from Kyle for Rain. So Kyle, I don't know if you wanted to ask that directly. We can have this as our last question before we wrap up, or did you want me to read it? Or
well, I'm honored to ask the closing question to Rain.
Yeah.
And Rain, hopefully you've seen that in the chat, but I'll just rephrase this for anyone who's listening, any of the participants. So my question responds to what you had mentioned earlier around digitally mediated violence, and you might have a different term for that, but and in your work with Nunavut Northwest Territories, that there are higher rates of that digital mediated violence, and the results of that are felt more personally across community, right? Smaller communities. And so a death or a suicide is just more impactful. I don't want to say like to diminish any other death or suicide, but communities feel it in a different way. And so my question to you is around in your digital literacy training, responding to that, what have you found to be really effective in reducing rates of digitally mediated violence in those spaces, and what works towards solutions around empowerment?
So I can answer a question. We're at 2:30. So my quick answer is empathy and compassion. And the longer answer, In terms of the development of training materials, and also the advocacy that we've done with platforms, with the ICT sector, with Facebook, Twitter, everyone, that the answer is the same. It's been around empathy, because in terms of the training pieces, it's to share the opportunity for people to understand that no one's an expert in this space, and we're all learning together. And so in teaching digital safety, security, etc., the more empathy we have with students, with service users, the better. So the training that we've incorporated has very much that patience and compassion built in. And so that's one piece. The second piece is about the platforms, really. And as part of our work with Project Shift, I actually had the opportunity. I created an information communications, an ICT roundtable, and really was working towards bringing the understanding of exactly the impact of how tech facilitated violence spreads in small communities. And so YWCA has we have a YWCA in Iqaluit, for example, in Nunavut. And so I used the concept of how fire can spread and how impactful a fire can be in a community that has no water to put it out. And using that analogy, I think was really helpful with the folks at Facebook and Twitter, and mostly Facebook actually, and Instagram, in understanding that in these smaller communities, the impact is great, because for one, at one point, Facebook, for example, was the only platform that was being used, right? And so that was an issue. So that was a really big part of not only the conversation, but also the training that we started putting together for folks in the ICT sector to better understand the experiences of service users. They use the word users as well. We use the same word, but a little bit differently. And so we actually did training around anti-racism and anti-oppression with tech folks, right? Because if they're not having an understanding of the lived experience of someone, then it's not going to hit. So what we did in a big way was ensure that wherever it was possible, we included narratives and experiences of folks who had given us permission to share their stories, of course, to do just that. And so also as part of our training around digital smarts, and also I've been training frontline workers around understanding tech facilitated violence and improving their own safety and security so that they can better support service users. So for example, women who are presenting at shelters, again, it's about that connection with empathy and compassion, because if someone is arriving at a shelter, having experienced intimate partner violence, having a conversation with them about their, the Internet of Things and all of that is not the right time, but having resources available for them to step away and look at their own safety and security after is much better. So I think that my answer really is about empathy and compassion, and that really shapes that shapes everything I do, really, but specifically in terms of this kind of education.
Thanks, Raina. I think that was a kind of perfect way to end this webinar, with a kind of showcasing that direct link between the research that you all do and kind of the direct impact that it has, especially when it comes to developing resources and supports for folks who need it. So thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks to all the panelists and everyone who attended today and everyone who might, stumble across the recording of this webinar in the future. I, of course, want to thank the Canadian Sociological Association for hosting this webinar, especially to Sherry Fox, who helped us organize and prepare for today. And a big thank you to Andrew and Annabelle from the Internet Technology and Digital Sociology Research Cluster for co-sponsoring and supporting this event. And I hope to see you all again soon and enjoy the rest of your day. And thanks again for joining.